Video coverage of ITEXPO is brought to you by Content Boost, the content marketing specialists. Amplify your sales today.
So it's great to be here. I noticed on the keynotes I'm the only one without a doctor in my name, so I'm going to try to keep up. I'm honored to be in front of you and talking about what we think is an interesting subject. I'm also very pleased not to be in Chicago right now, so I've enjoyed the trip to Miami Beach. One of the questions that you might be asking yourself is, what the hell Alcatel-Lucent's doing up here talking to, by and large, enterprise, CIOs, and IT folks? Well, in our industry, we're going through a lot of change just like anybody else, and we see telecommunications and IT coming together quite rapidly. What this traditionally has meant for us, I would say over the last few years, is we've been borrowing, and stealing shamelessly from best practices in IT and open source technologies. So when you walk around our company today, you see folks working on things like OpenStack and Hadoop and NoSQL databases and taking low-level telecom-specific protocols and interfaces and turning those into web services. If you look at our partners today, our partners tend to be folks like HP and Intel and Red Hat. We're going through its transformation, and we're really looking at adopting, as we move to a software-based industry, the best that IT has to offer. We also have noticed that there's a few things that we've been doing in telecommunications that we think actually apply to a broader enterprise market. One of those things is what we're doing in SDN with Nuage networks, where we think we have an ability to kind of change and disrupt the landscape of networking in enterprise. And the other is one I'm going to talk about today, and that is around IP communications. It's something that we've been doing in telecommunications that we think actually has a lot of applicability to the enterprise space. So let's get started on that. So if you think about kind of the thesis here, and that is we see a disruption happening in the enterprise vendor community. It's a disruption that's somewhat similar and analogous to what happened in OTT communications in telecommunications with folks like Skype and WhatsApp and so forth and so on. And there's some things we can learn about this disruption. First, the disruption's about moving from closed, proprietary, expensive systems to systems that are open, that are API-driven, and that are interoperable. And the second disruption is we feel this is going to allow the CIO to have more choice and be more empowered to access innovation, use innovation within their business, and increase productivity. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges facing CIOs. You all know this very well. The point isn't here to talk about necessarily the challenges, but the point here is to talk about how we make these challenges opportunities. How do we make IT the hero within an enterprise? And if you look through some of these changes, what's great about it is we feel this every day as employees of companies, right? I mean, this isn't just something you read in the Gartner report. We live it. So mobility. Think about mobility and mobile devices. 99% of all my communications in my company, for myself, happens on my mobile phone. You think about where I work. 2 days a week I'm in the office, a day a week I'm on the road, the other days of the week I'm at home. Broadband, cloud, mobility have allowed me to do this. And so this role of mobile and the application ecosystem around it, where I can find an app for anything now, we all know this. I have a 3-year-old, she's having trouble with her letters and numbers, I just find an app for it. I mean, it's amazing, right? But then I go to work and I go to the enterprise, and it's not the same thing. So, mobility has a lot of great potential within an enterprise. We're all using it today. And it's somewhat painful. It's hard to integrate it into legacy systems. But what if it wasn't? What if it was easy to integrate into systems? What if the IT organization could be part of the solution and not the problem around mobility? And mobility's close friend is the consumerization. So BYOD and BYOA, you've heard all this stuff. I assume we all live it too. I mean, I'm frustrated with the tools and technologies I have in my company. I bring my own Mac. I bring my own iPad. I use my own productivity applications. Some of this my IT organization doesn't mind. Most of it they do. But the gap and the chasm between what we use in our personal life and what we use in an enterprise today is growing wider and wider. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yes, integrating, adopting this into current infrastructures and policies is time consuming, but what if it wasn't? Security can be a problem, but what if we resolve that? What if IT is the person pushing the agenda with regard to new applications and new services that enterprise users can access and adopt? And what if they could do that and wrap policy around it? Departmental IT, shadow IT, we've heard this, we've seen these reports that say, the CMO will spend more on IT by 2017 than the CIO, which I find interesting. I thought about that for a second, and I think about, well, hey, I'm a marketing guy. Is that true? I don't know if it's true in our company, but I spend a lot of money on IT and ways to get around it, whether that's adopting Salesforce.com, whether that's using marketing automation tools, whether that's using social media, whether that's using something like Asana for project management because the tools we have internally are no good. Maybe that's using GoToMeeting because my live meeting doesn't work on my Mac that I brought to the office because it's not supported by IT, right? So I started thinking about this. I'm like, yeah. I don't actually have a big budget, but a lot of it goes to IT, and a lot of it doesn't go through our IT organization. What if that doesn't have to be the case? What if IT could be seen as the organization that can bring technology, new technologies and adoption to the enterprise faster than doing it on your own? And the last one is the hybrid IT cloud concept. So the genie's out of the bottle with regard to innovation that we see on the internet and the web, right? So every new service is ran from the cloud. So how do we adapt to that, right? So how do we run systems that we can leverage that are cloud-based that are out there, and how do we couple those with things that we have in our own data centers? And how do we go about managing that? And when do we decide we're going to bring a service in? And how do we do that easily, and how do we support it? So these are all opportunities. Now you take that and you think, what if I could do that across any endpoint? This isn't just about the office anymore. This is about mobility. This is about geography. What would that make me? Would that make IT the hero? And how do I go about doing that? Well, one way we don't think it will happen is by going to your existing vendor community. So if you think about what's happening there, you take cloud, you take broadband, you take mobility, and we see a massive disruption happening here. The expectation for communication services in the enterprise is that things get cheaper, because that's what we feel and live as a consumer. So what happens when things get cheaper in an industry? The overall revenue and size of that industry shrinks. And what happens when it shrinks? Fierce competition and battle for what's remaining. And I love this quote from HP, right? Intel and Microsoft are turning into competitors, not partners. So we look at this and we say, industry shrinking, vendor conflict is growing, and that's going to lead to outright competition. And what does that mean for the CIO and the IT organization? Well, if you take the challenges and the opportunities of the CIO and you take this conflict happening in the vendor ecosystem, this is what you end up with. You end up with application silos, and this is the world we live in today, where each one of these things are built primarily by themselves. They're cross-integrated together in a very complex and proprietary way. This is not satisfactory to an end-user experience. One of the reasons that most people in the enterprise go outside. This is very expensive to maintain. And it's very expensive to actually launch a new application and service, and very complex to do this across these silos. And so this is the problem we face. But what if there's a more efficient model, right? One that's akin to web services. So instead of having silos with different interfaces to support services, different interfaces to network and external systems, instead of having silos that have conflicting services within them that overlap but don't work well together, What if there's a common framework for taking care of this? What if there was a service delivery model that allowed applications to easily integrate and work together in a common framework based on standard open technologies? And what if IT could use this to actually help the different departments they support use the technology and the devices that they desire? And we think there is one. And we think it all starts with common session management. And the irony of this, and I find this ironic coming from a telecommunications company, and those who know telecommunications at all will find it ironic, that the standard allows us to do this effectively in an enterprise is the same standard we're using in telecom to move to IP communications and switch over to PSTN, and that is IMS. And the first time we kind of had these conversations with a few large enterprises, and we took it back in our company, we're like, IMS, man, IMS. How's that going to go over for anyone who knows that? But if you think about what IMS is, there's 4 things to really remember here. So first, it's an architecture that's designed to support IP multimedia communications. That's what it stands for. It's an architecture that's designed to support multiple vendors on one common platform. It's an architecture that was built from the ground up to support interoperability, not just between vendors, but between operators. It's an architecture that's been evolved over time and has the impact of Moore's Law, where if you look at IMS today, I can support 2 million subscribers in 2 cabinets doing audio conferencing, video calling, video conferencing, virtual PBX, all the management required, open interfaces to do innovation on top of it, IM presence, 2 million subscribers and 2 cabinets. And the last thing, which is the most important, IMS was built with mobility in mind first. This was the reason it was conceived, was to handle mobile devices. And later it was adapted to support landline devices and so forth. So as we move into the future, where mobile is going to dominate the conversation with regard to enterprise communications, and at least is going to dominate the conversation in the complexity, we actually find IMS as a perfect architecture to support this transformation in the enterprise. But what's most important about this is what you actually get. So first and foremost, it dramatically simplifies the communications network infrastructure within an IT organization, which dramatically lowers the cost. It allows you to remove redundant systems, no more complex PBX hierarchies, which reduce costs. So everything about this is all about being able to reduce the costs, improve the simplicity of what you're doing today in order to fund the things that you need to do tomorrow. So this is great in theory. Let's take a look at a case study. So this is a large multinational enterprise. Their goal was they put out an RFP for common session management. And they had 3 simple goals that they wanted to achieve. They were having issues with call setup. They were having issues with drop calls. They're having issues that every time that they wanted to go upgrade a system, they had this n-squared complexity of integration, and it was expensive, time-consuming, and difficult to do. So they put out this RFP. And it's fairly modest, right? Now, they had aspirations of mobility and communications-enabled business processes and being innovative and doing a bunch of new things. But the basic part of the RFP was simplification and cost reduction. So the first step was just consolidation of SIP trunking. So of course we can do SIP trunking on PBXs today, but this is about eliminating PBX hierarchies, consolidating, aggregating SIP trunking, and lowering the cost structure even more. And that first step saves them $56 million. So you can imagine the business case starts catching people's attention. The next step was, elimination of PBXs. Now, you don't have to eliminate them all. They can plug them right into the common framework. But the fact that you have to have hierarchies in place, and they had some old PBXs that were end-of-lifing, that they wanted to, not upgrade. In the call center, they were looking at moving call routing out of the PBX and putting it in IMS. So this kind of network simplification saved them $40 million. And then the last one is they were able to accelerate soft phone implementation. So they got out of expensive maintenance contracts on proprietary hard phones and accelerated their move to soft phone, which saved them, about $10 a device. So what they're able to do on this architectural revamping is they started their journey of transformation and funded it all on, the first step of the project, right? So they get this in, they take these savings, and now they can apply these savings to doing things like mobility and consumerization and adding new services and integrating new applications and looking at kind of leading edge technologies out there and starting to wonder and think and strategize about how they can use new technologies to actually be beneficial to the departments they serve versus being the person that always says no. So, kind of pull all this together. So what is in the box? What is this IMS thing? And I'll couple that with what we see as a emerging business model around this kind of hybrid cloud piece. So it starts with a platform that you can think of as communications as a service. And you can think of that as that's something you put in your own data center. If you're an enterprise, that could be something that's offered to you by a telecommunications service provider as value added. It could be offered to you by somebody you're outsourcing your IT to. So, which is what we're looking at inside our company now, is how do we apply this inside Alcatel-Lucent, where we've outsourced our IT to a big vendor. And those conversations are happening. What we've also done in this box called IMS is we've opened up all the call control interfaces using web services for APIs, so third parties can easily integrate and build new capabilities. So if you think about some large enterprises can have up to 5,000, 10,000 developers building stuff, on the web, using IT tools. You don't need to know anything about IMS. You don't need to know anything about SIP. It's just web services, REST APIs, and you can create, call notifications. You can set up calls. You can set up conferences. You can do audio. You can do video. All available through simple APIs. And in fact, what we've done is we took an intern, 20-year-old college student, didn't tell him anything about the technology, knows nothing about telecommunications, and he built a unified communications application for us on his own and tested it in a couple months. And now it's something we use and show at trade shows, built by a 23-year-old. We've had enterprise partners build and test applications in 30 days. We have our own sandbox, so people can come and try it out for free if they'd like. And it's not just us. Our competition in the industry moving this direction are all kind of moving the same way. WebRTC, a hot topic in enterprise. So we've WebRTC enabled what we do within this IMS. It's something that we spend a lot of time on as well, looking at. Maybe that's a surprise to folks. We actually have WebRTC that's production generally available both in developer tools and gateways and so forth and so on. And the last point I want to say here is there's communications capabilities inherent to what we've been talking about. Presence, video, chat, conferencing, virtual PBX. These capabilities exist, and they can be used as part of the platform. That doesn't mean you can't plug existing PBXs in or new PBXs, and it doesn't mean that every function is going to be there for every situation. But there's definitely functionality there that can be leveraged. And this is something that not only are we putting on a cloud infrastructure, but what we're finding interesting when we talk to startups and people, small companies who are doing a lot of innovative things around communications, is most of them start in the cloud. They're building these in the cloud, And there's federation and models that we've been talking to them about, and companies about, but at some point, an enterprise is going to say, I want to move that in-house. And when you tell a 50 or 100 person company, I want to move your software from the cloud running on Amazon into my data center, they don't know how to do that, or they can't afford to do that. And so we're building out a framework around this to actually help do that. And we've had these conversations with both enterprises and innovative companies about how we can easily help them move their software infrastructure into a cloud architecture like this that could actually reside in a large enterprise. Now, this is all available across any endpoint. So you have this vision we've talked about before. Well, wouldn't it be great if my phone in my office and I had all the features, the same feature set as the one on my, my soft phone on my PC, that I could download something on my tablet and use that too, and on my mobile phone, I get the same experience. And this can happen. These are the things that are getting built out in the telecommunications world, and these are things that can be leveraged fairly easily in the enterprise. So, it's about being the hero. We feel there's a big opportunity for CIOs and IT departments to change the game. And we think there's a substantial opportunity here to fund the future by taking care of the present. So the stuff that you see here on the left, substantial savings can be driven in simplification to fund the things that you want to do on the right. Because if you think about it, I don't think anybody's budget is going to be increased for communication services in an enterprise, right? So, we want to do all these things. We have a vision to do all these things on the right. I don't think an enterprise is going to get more money to do these things. So the funding needs to come from somewhere. The funding comes from the left. And this all can be done off the same common platform. So, three things to take away. Major disruption. This disruption is positive for the enterprise. It's positive for the enterprise employee and the enterprise's customers. It's positive for telecommunications providers if this is a space that you want to get in, if there's any in the room. It's positive for big communications outsourcers like HP and BT Global Services and so forth. It's not positive for the traditional vendors in this space who've been living off fat margins and locked in proprietary technology. Point two, we've talked about this over and over, is about reducing costs in the initial step right out of the gate to get a return on investment and be able to fund the future. And the last piece here again, for those who are the early adopters and who desire to be different and have IT play a different role within your organization, here's an opportunity for you to be the hero. Instead of IT equaling no, you can be the organization that says yes. With that, got a few minutes left. Can take some questions, or we can get together afterwards. But thank you very much.
So you know what? You have time for a couple questions if you want, just two, right?
Okay.
Two questions.
Two questions. Excuse me?
How pervasive is IMS in telecom world?
Good question. I'll answer that in two ways. In your traditional fixed line business, so things that go to your home and enterprise, it's probably in 20 to 30% of that market. Because, so you have a lot of PSTN still out there, but that's growing in the range of 15%. The place that it's becoming a hot topic is in mobility. So you hear something called voice over LTE. I don't know if you've heard this term, but this is where we see substantial growth in the telecommunications industry. Growth on the magnitude of 30 to 40% a year as carriers start moving their legacy circuit mobile networks to all IP networks. And that would be the same technology that you would use within your enterprise. So if you think about going forward in the future over the next 5 or 10 years, the ability to kind of coexist and interoperate those services will be fairly easy on an IMS network because of the interoperability capabilities. So we'll see voice over LTE rolled out aggressively starting in the US market in 2014 and going into 15. And then the rest of the world will go 2015, 2016. Yes? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, so, you know, even a few years ago, this conversation couldn't happen because it just wasn't built at that time to support an enterprise, basically to scale down. But this has changed because of the maturity of the technology and the evolution of the technology. So it's really a software-based platform now that can run in a data center. In most cases, will be running in automated fashion on a cloud by 2015. Price points have come down. It's been greatly simplified. So now we see it as an opportunity for an enterprise today, whereas 2 or 3 years ago we didn't. And it's not just an enterprise buying it from a carrier. I mean, these systems are systems that an enterprise can actually deploy in their own data center and have their own instance. So there's a variety of different models. So, and we'll see this getting better and better over time. I mean, this is still early adopter stuff. It's still for folks who are kind of on the cutting edge of changing what they're doing. But it's rapidly getting better and better and packaged in a more streamlined way that enterprises can consume. And it's not just Alcatel-Lucent. It's the Ericssons and the Nokia Siemens and the Huaweis and stuff doing the same thing. So it's the industry, really. Yeah. One more? One more.
So both of the examples that you showed, there was tens of millions of dollars in cost for tens of millions of dollars in savings. Do these technologies apply? Does the strategy apply at all to the mid-market?
Yeah.
Where you're looking at 5 or 6 digits and not 7?
Yeah. Let me answer it this way. Today, it applies much better to large enterprises, to be honest. Two ways you can think about it in an enterprise setting, and that is offered as a cloud service from a provider. It wouldn't be us. It'd be somebody like a service provider or somebody like an HP, potentially, that you would outsource your mid-market communication services to. What will happen based on the back of the enterprise, large-scale enterprise, is the ecosystem needs to be built out better around this technology for a mid-market. So it's not necessarily about scaling down the infrastructure. That's happening. It's making sure that there's an ecosystem around it that can support end-to-end services for that market. And I'm not going to try to stand up here and say that exists today, but I see that being developed over the next couple of years. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Video coverage of ITEXPO is brought to you by Content Boost, the content marketing specialists. Amplify your sales today.